Isolde ran through the rain-soaked darkness, 8 months pregnant, and alone with nothing but a fake name and the secret growing in her belly. The wolfsbane tea she'd been drinking for months had masked her scent, turned her invisible to the trackers hunting her. But to understand why Aluna would abandon her throne, her mate, and everything she'd built, you have to go back. Back to the anniversary dinner where everything shattered. 5 years earlier, the crystal chandeliers of the Northern Ridge pack house had cast fractured light across the mahogany dining table, each prism reflecting what should have been a celebration. Isolde Hartwell sat perfectly still at the head of the table, her champagne glass untouched, watching her husband pretend everything was fine. Callum raised his glass to the assembled pack members. His smile was political practiced, the same smile he wore during territory negotiations and peace summits. Not the smile he used to save for her alone. The toast was brief, something about partnership in the future. The words blurred together because Isolde had stopped listening to empty promises months ago. She learned to read the spaces between his words instead, the careful omissions, the topics he sidestepped with the precision of someone walking through a minefield. When the applause died down and the guests began to filter out into the evening air, Isolde excused herself to the balcony. The October wind cut through the wool of her dress, but she welcomed the cold. It was honest. It didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. Below the pack lands stretched endlessly into the darkness. 12 territories unified under one banner, Callum's banner, and for 5 years it had been hers too, until it wasn't. The door behind her opened with a whisper of hinges. She didn't turn. She knew the footsteps. Grandmother Margot moved slowly these days, each step deliberate, but her presence still commanded attention. 75 years old and still sharper than most wolves half her age. She'd been Luna of this pack for 40 years before retiring. 40 years of weathering storms that would have broken lesser women. She'd survived them all. "You're thinking too loudly, child." Margot's voice carried the texture of old parchment and steel. "I can hear it from across the hall." Isolde finally turned. Margot stood wrapped in a silver shawl, her white hair pulled back in the same elegant knot she'd worn since Isolde first met her. Her eyes pale blue and knowing saw far too much. "I'm fine." "Liar." The word held no judgment, just fact. Margot moved to stand beside her, gazing out at the territory with the eyes of someone who'd once ruled it. "The council met again today. Don't ask me how I know. I'm old, not deaf, and old wolves have very good sources." Isolde's fingers tightened on the balcony rail. "Silas Grimwood is pushing for the trial of lineage." Margot said it plainly without cushioning. She'd never believed in softening blows. "He thinks 5 years is long enough to wait. He's gathering votes." The trial of lineage. Ancient pack law rarely invoked but never abolished. If an alpha's mate failed to produce an heir within 5 years, the council could demand she step aside should another woman carry his child. It was designed for political marriages gone cold, not for true mates, not for bonds forged by the moon itself. Callum wouldn't allow it, but even as Isolde said the words, they tasted like ash. Margot was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of experience and regret. 43 years ago, I stood exactly where you're standing, barren, childless, facing a council that measured my worth by what I couldn't give them. Isolde looked at her properly for the first time that evening. She'd heard pieces of this story before, but never the full weight of it. They wanted me gone. Silas Grimwood's father led the charge, demanded my husband take a second wife, said the pack needed heirs more than it needed my dignity. Margot's jaw set in a way that suggested the old fury still burned. But I fought them, exposed their embezzlement schemes, reminded them that Aluna's power doesn't come from her womb. It comes from her will. And you won. I survived. There's a difference. Margot turned to face her fully. I adopted Callum's father when he was 3 days old. Loved him as fiercely as any child born from my body. The council eventually accepted it because I gave them no other choice. She reached into her shawl and pulled out a leather-bound journal, worn smooth with age. The cover was unmarked, but Isolde could smell the age of it. Decades of secrets pressed between those pages. This contains records of every transaction, every backroom deal, every dirty compromise the current council has made in the last 10 years. Margot pressed it into Isolde's hands. If you choose to fight, use this. If you choose to run, guard it with your life. Either way, you hold power they don't want you to have. The journal was heavier than it should have been. Why are you giving me this now? Because I know what's coming, child, and because 43 years ago I wish someone had armed me before the battle began. Margot's hand, papery and thin, covered Isolde's. Aluna's worth isn't in her womb. It's in her spine. Remember that when they try to break you. The old woman turned and walked back into the warmth of the pack house, leaving Isolde alone, with secrets that could either save her or destroy everything. The next morning arrived dressed in fog and false normalcy. Isolde went through the motions of her daily routine. Breakfast with the Omega families who managed the kitchens, reviewing supply orders for winter, mediating a property dispute between two Beta families in the northern quarter. All the small essential tasks that held a pack together. The invisible labor no one noticed until it stopped. Dr. Astrid Blackwell found her in the medical wing just after noon. Astrid had been pack physician for 15 years, and in that time she'd become the closest thing Isolde had to a true friend within the pack. She was direct, pragmatic, and fiercely protective of her patients. She was also the only one who knew exactly how many times Isolde had hoped and failed. The council has called an emergency assembly for tomorrow night. Astrid closed the door to the supply room where Isolde was counting bandages. Official reason is territory expansion discussions. Actual reason is anyone's guess. Grimwood. Leading the charge. Astrid leaned against the counter, her arms crossed. I've been hearing whispers. Nothing concrete. But the energy in this pack house has shifted. You feel it too, don't you? Isolde did. It was like the air before a lightning strike. Charged. Dangerous. Waiting. Whatever's coming, I need you to promise me something. Astrid's voice dropped lower. If they try to force you out, if they invoke some ancient law or political maneuver, don't go quietly. Fight them. You've earned your place here 1,000 times over. And if fighting isn't enough, Astrid was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and pressed it into Isolde's palm. Then you run. This is the address of a safe house in Oregon. Neutral territory. No pack affiliations. A friend of mine runs it. If you ever need to disappear, she'll help. No questions. Isolde stared at the paper. The address was handwritten in Astrid's precise script. Why are you doing this? Because I took an oath to protect life. And sometimes that means protecting the living from those who should be protecting them. Astrid's eyes were hard. And because I've watched you give everything to this pack for 5 years, and I'll be damned if I let them throw you away like you're nothing. The emergency assembly was scheduled for 7 that evening. Isolde dressed carefully. Not the ceremonial Luna robes she wore for formal pack gatherings, but something simpler. A deep green dress that her mother had given her the day she accepted Callum's mating bond. She wore her hair down unadorned. If this was going to be a trial, she would face it as herself. The Great Hall was already full when she arrived. Pack members lined the walls, standing in the hierarchical arrangement that Werewolf Society demanded. Betas and Omegas in the back, elite warriors and family heads in the middle, the Council of Elders seated at the raised platform at the front, and Callum, standing at the center of it all, looking like a man being led to his own execution. He met her eyes across the room. For just a moment, she saw something that looked like apology. Then Elder Silas Grimwood rose from his seat, and the moment shattered. Grimwood was a relic of old pack politics, 68 years old with silver hair and eyes like flint. He'd served on the council for 30 years, and in that time he'd never once voted in favor of progressive reform. He believed in bloodlines and tradition, and the rigid structures that kept power concentrated in the hands of men like him. Brothers and sisters of Northern Ridge, he began, his voice carrying easily across the hall. We gather tonight for a matter of great importance to our pack's future. Isolde's pulse quickened, but she kept her face neutral. She'd learned long ago that showing fear to predators only made them hungrier. Our Alpha King has served us well for 10 years. Under his leadership, we have expanded our territory, strengthened our alliances, and maintained peace across 12 pack lands. Grimwood's gaze swept the room, deliberately skipping over Isolde. But a pack without an heir is a pack without a future. Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves. Isolde could feel eyes turning toward her, pitying, judging, measuring. 5 years ago, our Alpha took a mate. We celebrated that union. We hoped for the children that would secure our legacy. Grimwood paused, letting the weight of that statement settle. Those children have not come. Callum's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Tonight I invoke the trial of lineage, ancient law, sacred law. If a Luna cannot provide an heir, she must step aside for one who can. The words landed like stones thrown into still water. The ripples spread outward, carrying shock and scandal with them. Isolde remained perfectly still. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. That is an outdated law, a voice called from the crowd, one of the younger council members, Elder Thorne. We haven't invoked it in over 50 years. Old does not mean invalid, Grimwood's voice hardened. And tonight it is necessary. He gestured toward the main doors. They opened, and Celestine Laurent walked in. She was beautiful in the way that knives were beautiful. Sharp, cold, deliberate. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders, and her blue eyes held a calculating gleam that made Isolde's wolf growl low in warning. But it wasn't her appearance that made the air leave Isolde's lungs. It was the unmistakable swell of her belly beneath the silk of her dress. 4 months, maybe 5. Celestine walked to the center of the hall with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what power she held. She stopped beside Callum close enough that her scent would carry to every wolf in the room. And it did carry. Sweet vanilla, wild orchids, and underneath it all, the unmistakable mark of an alpha. Callum's scent. The hall erupted into chaos. Voices rising, wolves shifting in agitation, the careful social order splintering into confusion and outrage. Isolde couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The mate bond in her chest, usually a warm tether connecting her to Callum, suddenly felt like a fist closing around her heart. Grimwood raised his hand for silence. It took several moments, but eventually the noise subsided to angry whispers. This is Celestine Laurent, daughter of Alpha Dominic Laurent of the Cascade Ridge Pack. She carries the Alpha's child, conceived at the autumn summit 3 months ago. 3 months ago. Isolde did the math automatically. The autumn summit had been in early July. It was now late October. 4 months, not 3. The timeline didn't match. But before she could voice that observation, Grimwood continued. Under the trial of lineage, Celestine Laurent has the right to claim the position of Luna. The council will vote on this matter in 3 days' time. No. The word came from Isolde before she fully realized she'd spoken. Her voice rang clear across the suddenly silent hall. Every eye turned to her. She stepped forward, moving through the crowd with the grace she'd cultivated over 5 years of public duty. When she reached the center, she didn't look at Celestine. She looked at Callum. Is it true? 2 words, a simple question. But they carried the weight of everything they'd built together. Callum's face was carved from stone. Guilty, trapped, but not surprised. He'd known this was coming. His voice caught, started again. It was a mistake. One night, I was drunk. The stress of the pack, the council's pressure. I wasn't thinking clearly. That's not what I asked. Yes. The word came out like broken glass. Yes, it's mine. The mate bond twisted, sharpened. Pain lanced through Isolde's chest like physical injury. She'd known on some level that this moment was coming. The whispers had been growing louder. The council's pressure more intense. But knowing and experiencing were 2 entirely different species of pain. You knew. She said it quietly, but the acoustics of the great hall carried her voice. You knew before tonight, before this assembly, before you stood beside me at our anniversary dinner and lied through your teeth. Callum flinched. Celestine, however, smiled. Small, victorious. The pack needs an heir, Grimwood interjected smoothly. Personal feelings, however unfortunate, must take a secondary position to the survival of our bloodline. This isn't about bloodlines. Isolde turned her attention to the elder, and she let every ounce of fury she'd been holding back bleed into her voice. This is about power, your power. You want a Luna you can control. Careful, girl. Grimwood's eyes narrowed. You're addressing a council elder. I'm addressing a manipulator who's been undermining this pack's stability for his own gain. Isolde pulled Margot's journal from where she'd hidden it in the folds of her dress. She held it up for everyone to see. This journal contains detailed records of every illegal transaction, every bribe, every backdoor deal the council has made in the last decade. Should I start reading? The temperature in the room plummeted. Grimwood's face went carefully blank, but Isolde saw the flash of panic in his eyes. That journal is the property of Margot Hartwell and protected by privacy laws, he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Margot gave it to me freely, and pack law states that evidence of corruption overrides privacy protections. Isolde looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of pack members she'd served alongside for 5 years. I could expose everything right now, bring this entire council down, but I'm going to give you all a choice instead. She turned back to Callum. Investigate her pregnancy. Properly, medical records, timeline verification. DNA testing if necessary. She gestured to Celestine without looking at her. If this child is truly yours, if the dates match, if everything is legitimate, then I'll step aside. I'll invoke the resignation clause myself. Callum looked like he wanted to say something, but Isolde wasn't finished. But if I find even one inconsistency, one forged document, one lie, then I want Grimwood removed from the council and Celestine exiled from Packlands. The hall erupted again. This time the voices were divided. Some shouted support. Others called for order. The carefully maintained hierarchy was fracturing in real time. Grimwood stood, his face flushed with rage. You have no authority to make demands of this council. Actually, under Article 12 of PAC law, a Luna accused of failing her duties has the right to challenge the evidence against her. The voice came from the back of the hall. Grandmother Margot stood in the doorway, leaning on her cane but standing tall. She moved forward slowly and the crowd parted for her like water. The trial of lineage requires proof, not just accusation. Isolde has the right to demand verification. Margot's gaze swept the council. Unless you've changed PAC law without informing the former Luna. Grimwood's mouth opened, closed. He looked to the other council members for support, but several of them were already nodding in agreement. 3 days, Margot said firmly. You've given 3 days before the vote. That's 3 days for a full medical investigation. Dr. Blackwell will conduct it personally as PAC physician. Unbiased. Thorough. Astrid stepped forward from where she'd been standing with the medical staff. I'll need complete access to all medical records, including records from Celestine's home PAC and any outside clinics she's visited. Celestine's smile faltered for the first time. This is unnecessary, Grimwood protested. The child is obviously the alphas. Then you should have no problem with verification. Margot's tone allowed no argument. Unless there's something you're afraid we'll find. The challenge hung in the air. Callum, who had been silent through most of the exchange, finally spoke. Do it. Full investigation. I want to know the truth. He looked at Isolde when he said it, and for just a moment she saw something genuine in his expression. Doubt, confusion, maybe even regret. But it was too little too late. Grimwood looked like he wanted to argue further, but the momentum had shifted. Too many witnesses. Too much doubt already sown. Fine, he bit out. 3 days. Dr. Blackwell will have full access to medical records. We'll reconvene for the vote on Friday evening. The assembly dissolved into clusters of conversation. Wolves whispering, speculating, choosing sides. Isolde didn't stay to hear any of it. She walked out of the great hall with her spine straight and her head high, refusing to let them see how close she was to shattering. She made it to her private chambers before the first sob broke free. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of investigation and quiet desperation. Isolde threw herself into research, spending every waking moment in the PAC archives, cross-referencing dates and documents. Astrid worked parallel tracks, conducting her medical investigation with the precision of a surgeon. She requested Celestine's full medical history from the Cascade Ridge PAC, demanded ultrasound records, blood work, genetic panels, and with each request, Celestine's confidence seemed to waver just a little more. On the second day, Isolde found it. Buried in the financial records Margot had meticulously documented, there was a payment, $300,000 transferred from an offshore account registered to Silas Grimwood's late wife's estate. The recipient was the Portland Fertility and Women's Health Clinic. The date of the transfer was 6 months ago, 2 months before the autumn summit. Isolde cross-referenced the clinic's name with Celestine's travel records, which she'd obtained through a contact in the Cascade Ridge PAC. Celestine had visited Portland 5 times in the 6 months before the summit. The timeline was wrong, all of it. If Celestine was 4 months pregnant now, as she claimed she would have conceived in late June or early July. The summit was in early July, but the payments to the clinic started in April, which meant either Celestine had been trying to get pregnant before ever meeting Callum, or someone had paid to make it look like she had. Isolde brought the evidence to Astrid that evening. They spread the documents across the medical wing's private office, building a case that grew more damning with each piece. The ultrasound images she provided show a fetus at approximately 16 weeks, Astrid said, pointing to the medical files. But the timestamp on the digital file has been altered. Badly. Whoever forged this didn't account for metadata. Can you prove it? I can prove the files were tampered with. The original images are probably from a different patient entirely. Astrid pulled out another document. And there's something else. The blood type markers in her initial pregnancy test don't match the blood type she listed on her PAC medical records. Isolde leaned back in her chair, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. Grimwood paid to fabricate the pregnancy evidence. But why? What does he gain from installing Celestine as Luna? Control, Astrid's voice was grim. Celestine is young, inexperienced, and from a minor PAC. Grimwood could manipulate her easily. You, on the other hand, have been Luna long enough to know how to wield power. You're a threat to him. So he orchestrated this entire situation to remove me and install a puppet he could control. That's my guess. Isolde stared at the evidence. She had everything she needed to expose the conspiracy, to vindicate herself, to reclaim her position. But something gnawed at her. She found Callum in his private study that night, staring at papers he wasn't reading. He looked up when she entered, and the exhaustion on his face was genuine. I have the evidence, she said without preamble. The payments, The forged medical records? The timeline inconsistencies? All of it. Callum's eyes closed briefly. I suspected. When you demanded the investigation, I started looking into it myself. I found the offshore accounts this morning. Then you know Grimwood manipulated this entire situation. Yes. And you know Celestine's pregnancy is either fabricated or not yours. Yes. Isolde waited, but he didn't say anything else. That's it. Just yes. What do you want me to say, Isolde? His voice cracked on her name. That I'm sorry, that I was an idiot, that I let the council's pressure cloud my judgment to the point where I didn't even question whether the child was actually mine. I want you to tell me that when I present this evidence tomorrow, you'll stand beside me, that you'll back me when I demand Grimwood's removal and Celestine's exile. Callum stood moving to the window. His reflection in the glass looked haunted. If we expose this now, the pack will fracture. Half the council is loyal to Grimwood. The other half is already questioning my leadership. We'll have a civil war on our hands. A cold weight settled in Isolde's stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying we need to be strategic. Let the vote happen. Let Celestine's pregnancy play out. In a few months when the child is born, we can quietly request a DNA test. If it's not mine, we'll have proof then, without triggering a pack-wide crisis now. You want me to step down? I want us to prevent a war. By sacrificing me. By buying time to handle this properly. Callum turned to face her. Isolde, I know how this sounds. I know what I'm asking. But the stability of the pack has to come first. The stability of the pack. She repeated the words slowly, tasting the bitterness. That's what matters. Not truth. Not justice. Not the 5 years I've devoted to these people. That's not fair. Fair. The laugh that escaped her was sharp enough to draw blood. You let another woman announce her pregnancy in front of our entire pack. You admitted to cheating on your mate. You stood there and said nothing while Grimwood invoked ancient law to strip me of my title. And now you want me to quietly accept exile so you can avoid political inconvenience? It's not exile. You could stay. In the East Wing. We could keep the mate bond private. Once this blows over, keep me as your mistress. The words came out flat, dead. While your pregnant not mistress parades around with my title. Isolde, no. She cut him off. I trusted you. I stood beside you for 5 years while everyone whispered that I was barren, broken, failing in my duty. I endured the council's judgment and the pack's pity because I believed you when you said we had time, that our bond was stronger than politics. Callum reached for her, but she stepped back. You lied. And worse than that, you're choosing a fabricated crisis over your mate. You're choosing political convenience over truth. I'm choosing the pack's survival. You're choosing cowardice. The words hung between them like a blade. Callum looked like she'd struck him, but Isolde felt nothing but hollow certainty. She turned toward the door. Where are you going? To pack my things. I won't wait for your council's vote. I won't give Grimwood the satisfaction of watching me be stripped of my title in front of everyone I've served. Isolde, please, don't do this. We can figure it out. Just give me time. She stopped at the threshold, looking back at him one last time. I gave you 5 years, Callum. That was all the time you deserved. She walked out, and this time he didn't try to stop her. The storm arrived just after midnight. Thunder rolled across the mountains and rain lashed against the windows of the pack house with the fury of something wild and uncaged. Perfect. Isolde moved quickly, efficiently. 1 duffel bag, changes of clothes, cash from the safe in her chambers, the journal Margot had given her, the address Astrid had provided, and from the pack's medical storage carefully hidden in layers of cloth, small jars of dried wolfsbane. The ultimate poison for a werewolf. Lethal in large doses. But in carefully measured amounts, it could suppress a wolf's scent. Make them smell completely, utterly human. Untrackable. She'd researched it years ago during a public health initiative. Never imagined she'd use it on herself. Astrid found her in the medical wing just as she was preparing to leave. You're really doing this? I have to. You know I can't stay. Astrid pulled her into a fierce hug. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. The wolfsbane will make you sick, nauseous, weak. Don't take it for more than a few months, and if you feel severely ill, stop immediately. I will. And this. Astrid pressed a burner phone into her hand. My number's already programmed. If you need anything at all, you call me. Isolde nodded, not trusting her voice. She made one final stop before leaving. Margot's chambers were dark, but the old woman was awake, sitting by her window watching the storm. I wondered if you'd come to say goodbye, Margot said without turning around. I'm sorry I couldn't fight them the way you did. Fighting looks different for everyone, child. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Margot turned finally, her pale eyes reflecting the lightning. But this isn't goodbye. It's just a different path. Thank you for everything, for the journal, for teaching me that I'm more than what they tried to make me. Margot stood moving slowly but deliberately and pulled Isolde into an embrace. She smelled like lavender and old books and something indefinably safe. Go, she whispered. And when you're ready to come back changed, come back stronger, come back on your own terms. I don't know if I'll ever come back. You will, because you're not running from them, child. You're running toward yourself. Isolde slipped out through the servants' passages, the routes she'd learned in 5 years of managing pack logistics. The rain soaked through her clothes within seconds, cold and punishing. She didn't shift into her wolf form. Paw prints were too distinctive. Instead, she ran on two legs, stumbling over roots and stones, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The mate bond pulled at her chest with every step, a physical hook, urging her to turn back, to return to Callum, to accept the half-life he offered. But she kept running. By the time she reached the highway 3 miles from Packlands, she was shivering violently. A Greyhound bus was pulling into the small station, its destination sign reading Oregon. Isolde bought a ticket with cash, giving the name Ivy North. She found a seat in the back, pressed her face against the rain-streaked window, and watched her entire world disappear into the darkness behind her. She didn't cry. She was too numb for tears. But as the bus pulled onto the highway, and the miles stretched between her and everything, she'd known. Isolde whispered a promise to the reflection in the glass. I will survive this. I will become more than what they tried to reduce me to. And one day they will understand exactly what they threw away. The storm followed her south through the night as if the sky itself was weeping for everything she'd lost. But somewhere in the chaos of rain and thunder and grief, Isolde felt her resolve hardening into something unbreakable. Not hope, not yet, but the beginning of survival. The bus deposited Isolde in a town called Pinehaven, just as dawn broke over the Pacific coast. The air tasted of salt and rain and the promise of anonymity. Exactly what she needed. The town was small, the kind of place where strangers were noticed but not necessarily questioned. Fishing boats bobbed in the harbor. Weathered buildings lined a main street that couldn't have been more than 3 blocks long, and everywhere the smell of the ocean, constant and cleansing. She found a motel first, the Seaside Inn. $28 a night, paid in cash, no questions asked. The room was basic. A bed with a quilted coverlet that had seen better decades. A bathroom with water pressure that stuttered and complained. A window that overlooked the parking lot, and beyond it, a slice of gray ocean. It was perfect. For the first 3 days, Isolde did nothing but sleep and try not to think. The wolfsbane made everything worse. Her stomach rebelled against even the simplest foods. Her head ached constantly. And the dreams, when they came, were visceral and unforgiving. Callum's face, the great hall, Celestine's triumphant smile, the feeling of the mate bond stretching, thinning, becoming something sharp and dangerous instead of warm and grounding. On the 4th day, she forced herself to leave the motel room. She needed work, money, a purpose beyond surviving each hour. The Copper Kettle Diner sat on the corner of Main and Harbor Street, its windows steamed from the heat of cooking and the cold of coastal autumn. A hand-painted sign hung above the door, faded but cheerful. Isolde pushed through the entrance and warmth enveloped her immediately. The smell of coffee and bacon and something baking in the back. The sound of silverware against plates and the low murmur of morning conversation. Behind the counter stood a woman who looked like she'd been carved from the same weathered wood as the fishing boats in the harbor. 72 if she was a day, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that had seen enough of life to stop being surprised by any of it. She looked up when Isolde approached, her gaze sharp and assessing. Help you. I saw the sign in the window. Waitress wanted. The woman studied her for a long moment, taking in the too thin frame, the shadows under her eyes, the careful way Isolde held herself like someone afraid of breaking. You ever waitressed before? No, but I learned fast. You running from something? The question was direct, unflinching, and somehow that honesty made it easier to answer. Yes. The woman nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected. Husband? Something like that. He gonna come looking for you here? I don't know. Another long pause. Then the woman extended her hand across the counter. Delphine Hayes. I own this place. You can start tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. Don't be late. Isolde shook her hand, feeling the calluses of decades of hard work. Ivy North. Delphine's eyes narrowed slightly at the name, recognizing it for the fabrication it was, but she didn't call it out. Ivy, right. You got a place to stay. The Seaside Inn. That place is a dump. There's a room above the hardware store 2 doors down. Landlord's my nephew. I'll call him. 300 a month, utilities included. I don't have first month's free. You can pay me back when you get your first paycheck. Delphine pulled a mug from beneath the counter and filled it with coffee. Black, strong enough to strip paint. Now sit down and eat something. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in days. Isolde wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the careful distance she'd promised herself she'd keep from everyone. But the kindness in Delphine's eyes, matter-of-fact and undemanding, broke through her defenses. She sat. Delphine disappeared into the kitchen and returned minutes later with a plate of scrambled eggs, toast, and hash browns. Simple food, nothing fancy. But when Isolde took the first bite, she realized she was starving. Delphine refilled her coffee and leaned against the counter, watching her eat with the satisfaction of someone who'd fed enough people to know when someone needed it most. You got family, Ivy. Not anymore. Everybody's got somebody. Not me. Delphine was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I lost my husband 27 years ago. Early onset Alzheimer's. He was 45. Didn't even recognize me by the end. Isolde looked up, startled by the sudden confession. Had 3 kids to raise. No money. No skills except cooking and stubbornness. Delphine's voice was steady, but there was an old grief underneath it. Worked 3 jobs for 5 years. Saved every penny. Bought this place when I was 50. Been running it ever since. Why are you telling me this? Because you got that look, like the world just knocked you flat and you're trying to figure out if it's worth getting back up. Delphine met her eyes. It is. Worth it, I mean. But you gotta get up on your own terms. Not because someone tells you to, not because you think you owe it to anyone, but because you decide you're not done yet. A crack opened in Isolde's chest. Not quite hope, but something adjacent to it. I don't know if I'm strong enough for that. You're here, aren't you? You ran. You survived. You're sitting in my diner eating breakfast instead of giving up. Delphine smiled, small and knowing. Honey, you're stronger than you think. You just don't know it yet. The first week was harder than Isolde expected. Not the work itself. Waitressing was simple enough once she learned the rhythm of it. Coffee refills, order taking, the delicate balance of being friendly without being intrusive. No, the hard part was the wolfsbane. She took it every morning, brewing it into a bitter tea that made her gag. The nausea was constant now, a low-grade misery that colored everything. Food tasted wrong, smells were too sharp, and her body felt like it was fighting a war against itself. But her scent remained human, completely, utterly mundane, and that was worth the suffering. Delphine noticed, of course. She noticed everything. You sick, Ivy. Just a stomach bug, I'll be fine. You've had that stomach bug for 2 weeks. I'm managing. Delphine didn't push, but she started leaving ginger tea at Isolde's station. Plain crackers, small kindnesses that said, I see you suffering, and I'm here without demanding explanations. The customers were kind too in their own way. Fishermen who came in at dawn smelling of salt and diesel. Retirees who nursed coffee for hours while doing crossword puzzles. Families with small children who made messes and left generous tips. Isolde learned their names, their orders, their stories. It was almost enough to make her forget sometimes who she really was. Almost. But every night alone in her small apartment above the hardware store, the truth came roaring back. The mate bond ached like a physical wound. She could feel Callum even across the distance. Feel his confusion, his grief, his wolf pacing and snarling and searching. She wrote letters she never sent. Dear Callum, I hope you're suffering the way I'm suffering. I hope the mate bond feels like broken glass in your chest. I hope you lie awake at night wondering where I am, and if I'm safe, and if I'll ever forgive you. I won't. She burned them in the sink afterward, watching the paper curl and blacken, trying to burn away the attachment with it. It never worked. Week 11 arrived with no warning and no mercy. Isolde was carrying a tray of breakfast orders to a table of construction workers when the room tilted sideways. The fluorescent lights blurred into streaks of white. The smell of frying bacon became overwhelming, nauseating, impossible. The tray slipped from her hands. She heard it crash, heard voices calling her name. Ivy, Ivy, are you okay? But she was already falling the floor, rushing up to meet her, and then nothing. She woke in a white room that smelled of antiseptic and bleach, a hospital, or a clinic. The distinction didn't matter because either way she was exposed, vulnerable. Delphine sat in a chair beside the bed, her face creased with worry. Easy, don't try to sit up too fast. What happened? You passed out, scared 10 years off my life. Delphine's hand was warm on her arm. The doctor's been in, ran some tests. She wants to talk to you. Panic spiked through Isolde. Tests meant blood work. Blood work could reveal things, non-human things. But before she could spiral completely, the door opened and a woman in a white coat entered. She was middle-aged with kind eyes and efficient movements. Ms. North, I'm Dr. Sarah Martinez. How are you feeling? Fine, I'm fine. Just low blood sugar, probably. Actually, your blood sugar is normal, but your blood pressure is quite low. Have you been under unusual stress lately? Isolde almost laughed. Unusual stress. That was one way to describe having your entire life implode. You could say that. Dr. Martinez pulled up a chair, her expression gentle. Ms. North, when was your last menstrual period? The question landed like a stone. Isolde tried to remember. Before the escape, before the assembly, before everything fell apart. 8 weeks, Owen. I don't know. It's been irregular. I see. Well, the blood work we ran was quite clear. You're pregnant. About 11 weeks based on your hormone levels. The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. Because Isolde had been trying to get pregnant for 5 years. 5 years of hope and disappointment and eventually resigned acceptance that her body simply couldn't do this thing that everyone expected of it. That's impossible. I assure you it's not. The test is quite definitive. Dr. Martinez consulted her chart. Have you been taking any medications or supplements? The wolfsbane. God, the wolfsbane. She'd been poisoning herself for weeks while pregnant. Some herbal tea. For stress. I'd recommend stopping that immediately. Whatever it is, it's likely contributing to your low blood pressure and nausea. Dr. Martinez's voice was professional but warm. You'll need to start prenatal vitamins. And honestly, Ms. North, you need to reduce your stress levels. For your health and the baby's. The baby. Isolde's hand moved to her stomach automatically, as if she could feel the presence growing there. 11 weeks, which meant conception happened right before she left, the last time she and Callum had been together. When he'd held her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. When he'd promised one more time that they'd figure it out together, before he'd proven that promise was worth nothing. Does the father know? Isolde's voice came out flat, empty. No, and he won't. It's just me. Dr. Martinez's expression softened with understanding. She'd clearly heard some version of this story before. You have options, Ms. North. Resources. Support groups. But whatever you decide, you don't have to do it alone. Except Isolde did have to do it alone. Because telling Callum meant going back. Meant being trapped in a gilded cage as nothing more than an incubator for his heir. Meant losing herself completely. I understand. Thank you, doctor. Delphine drove her home in silence. It wasn't until they reached the apartment that she finally spoke. You don't have to tell me anything, but if you need help, any kind of help, I'm here. Isolde looked at this woman who owed her nothing, who'd given her a job, a place to stay, and now unwavering support without asking for explanations. Thank you. And Ivy, or whatever your real name is. Delphine's voice was gentle. You're going to be okay. I don't know how yet, but you are. That night, Isolde poured every jar of wolfsbane down the sink, watched the dark liquid swirl and disappear. It was poison. It had been slowly killing her, and now it was killing something else too. Someone else. Her hand rested on her stomach, feeling for something she couldn't possibly feel yet. 11 weeks. A tiny cluster of cells that would become a person. Half her, half Callum. A child she'd wanted for 5 years. A child she never thought she could have. And now, impossibly, miraculously, devastatingly, she was pregnant. While 300 miles north on that same cold November night, everything was falling apart. Isolde didn't know it yet, but in the Northern Ridge pack house, Celestine Laurent had gone into premature labor. Dr. Astrid Blackwell worked for 6 hours to stabilize both mother and child. The baby boy was small but alive, breathing on his own, a fighter. But pack law was clear. All royal births required a genetic panel to confirm bloodline, to establish lineage, to protect the integrity of the alpha line. Astrid ran the tests herself, double-checked the results, ran them again to be absolutely certain, and then she brought the findings to Callum in his private study. He looked worse than she'd ever seen him. Gaunt, hollow. His eyes were more gold than brown now, his wolf too close to the surface. Mate bond withdrawal was destroying him slowly. The baby is healthy, Astrid said without preamble, but he's not yours. Callum stared at her. What? The DNA panel. The bloodline markers don't match. Not yours. Not pack genetics at all, actually. The father is a rogue wolf, or someone outside our territory. For a long moment, Callum said nothing. Then he started laughing. Not humor. Something darker. more broken. Of course he's not mine. He dragged his hands through his hair. What else? I dug deeper. The medical records Celestine provided, the ultrasound images, the initial pregnancy test results, all of them were forged. Poorly, actually. I'm surprised I didn't catch it sooner. You caught it when it mattered. Astrid pulled out a folder thick with documentation. There's more. I traced the payments Isolde found. The $300,000 from Grimwood's accounts. It went to the Portland clinic, yes, but also to a man named Declan Cross, a rogue wolf who's been seen with Celestine multiple times over the past year. Grimwood paid a rogue to get Celestine pregnant, and then orchestrated this entire situation to remove Isolde and install Celestine as a Luna he could control. Yes. Callum's fist slammed into the desk. Wood splintered. Where is Grimwood now? In the holding cells by your order, awaiting trial. I want him tried tonight. Full pack assembly. Every piece of evidence presented. I want everyone to know exactly what he did. Astrid hesitated. And Celestine? Exile her. Tonight. With the baby, let her raise the rogue's child in the rogue lands. Callum's voice was ice. She chose her path. Let her walk it. That night the great hall filled again, but this time the atmosphere was different. Tense. Uncertain. Wolves whispered about the Luna who'd vanished, about the Alpha whose wolf was clearly unstable, about the cracks forming in the foundation of their pack. Callum stood before them, and for the first time in his reign he looked fallible, human, broken. I stand before you tonight to admit I was wrong. The whispers stopped, every eye fixed on him. I allowed political pressure to cloud my judgment. I accepted lies as truth, and in doing so, I drove away my true mate, the Luna who served this pack faithfully for 5 years. He gestured to Astrid, who stepped forward with the evidence. Medical records, financial statements, testimony from the Portland clinic staff who'd been paid to falsify documents. One by one, the pieces fell into place. The conspiracy laid bare. When it was finished, the pack's fury was palpable. Wolves growled, some demanded blood. Callum held up his hand for silence. Elder Silas Grimwood orchestrated this betrayal. He will be imprisoned for life in the pack's holding cells. His family will forfeit their rank and holdings, and Celestine Laurent is hereby exiled from these lands. She will leave tonight and never return. And Luna Isolde, someone called from the crowd. What of her? Callum's expression cracked for just a moment, raw grief bleeding through. I don't know where she is. She ran because I failed to protect her, failed to believe her, failed to stand beside her when it mattered most. His voice roughened. I'm sending out trackers to find her, not to force her back, but to ensure she's safe, to beg her forgiveness, to bring her home if she'll allow it. He paused, then added quietly, and if she doesn't want to come back, I'll accept that too, because I owe her at least that much, the freedom to choose. The pack dispersed, slowly processing the revelations, but the damage was done. Trust once broken was not easily repaired, and Callum, standing alone in the empty great hall, felt his wolf howling in agony. He'd destroyed the one thing that mattered, and he didn't know if he'd ever get it back. Months passed in Pine Haven like a slow tide. Winter gave way to spring. Isolde's pregnancy progressed with textbook precision. Morning sickness faded around week 14. Her energy returned, and slowly, gradually, her body changed in ways that made the secret impossible to hide. Delphine noticed, of course. Noticed the way Ivy's uniform started fitting differently, the way she stopped drinking coffee, the protective way her hand drifted to her stomach when she thought no one was looking. But she didn't ask. Just started making sure Ivy got the lighter shifts, made sure she ate properly, made sure she took breaks. It was the kind of care Isolde hadn't realized she needed until she had it. The apartment above the hardware store became a sanctuary. Isolde spent her evenings reading pregnancy books from the library, planning, preparing, trying to imagine a future that included a child but didn't include Callum. It was harder than she expected, because late at night, when the ocean wind rattled the windows and the mate bond ached like an old wound, she wondered if she was doing the right thing. Wondered if keeping this secret was protecting her child or denying him a father. Wondered if Callum was looking for her. She got her answer in late March when she was 5 months pregnant. The burner phone Astrid had given her rang at 2 a.m. Isolde almost didn't answer, but something made her pick it up. Isolde, Astrid's voice, strained, urgent. I know you want to stay hidden. I know you have reasons, but I need to tell you something, and you need to listen. Isolde sat up in bed, her hand instinctively moving to her now visible belly. What happened? It's Margot. She's dying. The world tilted. What? Heart failure. Advanced stage. The doctors give her a few weeks at most. Maybe less. Astrid's voice cracked. She's asking for you, Isolde. Every day. She knows you're pregnant. Don't ask me how. She just knows. And she wants to see you before she goes. I can't. If I come back, Callum knows everything. The conspiracy. The forged medical records. Celestine's been exiled. Grimwood's imprisoned for life. The pack knows you were right about all of it. Isolde's chest tightened. And Callum, he's looking for you. Not to force you back. Just to know you're safe. He's falling apart, Isolde. His wolf is taking over. Mate bond withdrawal is killing him slowly. That's not my problem. I know, I'm not calling to advocate for him. I'm calling because Margot is dying, and she loves you, and she deserves to say goodbye. Isolde closed her eyes. Margot, the woman who'd given her strength when she had none, who'd armed her with truth and dignity, who'd loved her like a granddaughter. If I come, it's for one night. No one else can know, especially not Callum. I'll arrange it. There's a service entrance. I'll make sure it's clear. Delphine drove her north 2 days later. She didn't ask questions, just said, "You need to do this, honey. Family is everything, even the complicated kind." They drove through the night, arriving at the pack borders just before dawn. Astrid was waiting at the service entrance, her face drawn with exhaustion and grief. She's in her chambers. The guards know to stay away. You have maybe 2 hours before the household starts waking up. Isolde moved through the familiar halls like a ghost. Everything was the same. The mahogany paneling, the scent of pine and old books, the weight of history in every stone. But she was different, changed, carrying life in a place that had once made her feel so hollow. Margot's room was dimly lit. The old woman lay in bed propped up by pillows looking impossibly small. But when Isolde entered, her eyes opened and cleared with recognition. "I knew you'd come." Isolde crossed the room and sank into the chair beside the bed, taking Margot's papery hand in hers. "I'm sorry I stayed away so long. Don't apologize for surviving, child. That's what I taught you to do." Margot's eyes traveled to Isolde's stomach, and she smiled. "And I see you've been busy. I didn't know. When I left, I swear I didn't know. But you know now, and you're keeping the baby." "Yes." "Good." Margot squeezed her hand weakly. "That child carries the true bloodline. Callum's heir. Born from love, even if it's broken love now." "I'm not going back, Margot. I can't. I'm not asking you to, but I need you to promise me something." Margot reached for something on the bedside table. A locket, silver and delicate. She pressed it into Isolde's palm. "This belonged to my husband's mother. Inside is a photograph of Callum's father when he was 3 days old. The day I adopted him, the day I chose to be his mother, even though biology said I couldn't." Isolde opened the locket. A tiny black and white photo showed a baby wrapped in blankets, and beside him a younger Margot, her face radiant with love. Bloodlines don't make family, Isolde. Choice does. Love does. Teach your child that. Teach him that his worth doesn't come from who his father is or what pack he's born into. Teach him that he gets to choose who he becomes. Tears streamed down Isolde's face. "I will. I promise. And one more thing." Margot's voice was getting weaker. "When you're ready, when you've healed, come back. Not for Callum, not for the pack, but because this is your home too. You earned it. Don't let anyone take that from you." "I don't know if I can." "You can, because you're stronger than you know, stronger than I was. And that baby you're carrying, he's going to be extraordinary, because he has you for a mother." They sat in silence, then hands clasped, while the dawn light slowly filled the room. Margot's breathing became shallower. Her grip loosened. And just before Isolde had to leave, before the household woke and her presence was discovered, Margot whispered one last thing. "I held on just long enough to know he'd be safe. Your baby, my great-grandson. Now I can rest." Isolde kissed her forehead. "Thank you, for everything, for seeing me when no one else did." She slipped out the way she came, the locket clutched in her hand, her heart breaking and healing in the same breath. She was halfway to the service entrance when she heard footsteps behind her. Fast, purposeful. She turned. Callum stood at the end of the corridor. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. His face was gaunt. His eyes were gold. His clothes hung on him like he'd forgotten to eat or sleep or care. But it was the way he looked at her that stopped her breath. Not anger, not demand, just devastation and hope warring for space in his expression. His eyes dropped to her stomach, to the unmistakable swell of pregnancy beneath her coat. And Callum's knees buckled. He didn't fall dramatically, just sank down like someone had cut his strings, his hands covering his face, as a sound escaped him that was half sob, half howl. Isolde. Her name was a prayer and a confession and a plea all at once. I can't do this right now. Her voice shook. I came for Margot, not for you. I know, I know. He didn't try to stand, didn't try to approach. Is it mine? The question was so quiet she almost didn't hear it. Yes. His eyes closed. When they opened again, tears tracked down his face. I didn't know. God, Isolde, I didn't know you were pregnant when you left. Would it have mattered? Would you have chosen differently if you'd known? He flinched like she'd struck him. I don't know. And that's what makes it worse, isn't it? I don't know if I would have had the courage to choose right even then. Footsteps in the distance. The household was waking. I have to go. Please, please, just tell me you're safe, that you have somewhere to stay, someone taking care of you. I'm fine, I'm managing. Let me help. Let me send money, medical care, anything. I don't want your help, Callum. I want you to let me go. He stood slowly and she saw how much effort it took, how the mate bond was physically destroying him. I can't let you go. You're my mate, but I can respect your choice. I can give you space. I can wait. His voice broke. However long it takes, Isolde, I'll wait. Don't wait for me. Move on. Find someone who can give you what you need without all this damage. There is no one else. There will never be anyone else. You're it for me, and I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I destroyed what we had, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to become someone worthy of you. Even if you never forgive me, even if you never come back. Isolde wanted to be unmoved, wanted to feel nothing but cold satisfaction at seeing him broken. But the mate bond wouldn't let her. She felt his pain like it was her own, felt his wolf howling, felt the sincerity in his words. It would have been easier if he'd been cruel. Goodbye, Callum. She turned and walked away. This time he didn't follow. But as she reached the service entrance, she heard him call out one last thing. I love you, Isolde. I know I have no right to say it anymore, but I do, and I always will. She didn't look back. Delphine was waiting in the car engine running. She took one look at Isolde's face and pulled her into a hug. You did good, honey. You said your goodbyes. Now we go home. Home. A small apartment above a hardware store. A job at a diner. A life built from nothing. It wasn't much, but it was hers. And as they drove south away from everything she'd known, Isolde felt a determination settling into her bones. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe eventually the possibility of it. The locket around her neck felt warm against her skin. A reminder. A promise. Bloodlines don't make family. Choice does. And Isolde was choosing herself. Choosing her baby. Choosing to build a life on her own terms. 2 days later, word reached Pine Haven through Astrid's burner phone. Margot had passed peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by flowers, at peace. Isolde cried for hours that night, for the woman who'd been more mother to her than Luna, for the future Margot would never see, for the great-grandson she'd never hold. But in the grief there was also gratitude. Margot had held on just long enough, had given her the locket, had blessed the baby, had told Isolde one final time that she was stronger than she knew. And in the months that followed as spring turned to summer and Isolde's belly grew round and full, she held on to that strength like a lifeline. By the time summer arrived in Pine Haven, Isolde had settled into the rhythm of her new life. The apartment above the hardware store had transformed into a nursery. Second-hand furniture painted fresh white, tiny clothes washed and folded, a bassinet that Delphine's nephew had refinished with his own hands. The pregnancy progressed beautifully. No complications, no concerns. Just the steady, miraculous process of creating life. Delphine had become something more than an employer, more than a friend. She was the grandmother Isolde's child would need. Present, supportive, asking no questions about the past, only caring about the future being built. The regulars at the diner watched Ivy's belly grow with the protective affection of a small-town community. They brought baby gifts, offered hand-me-down cribs, shared their own birthing stories over coffee and pie. It was the kind of love Isolde had never expected to find, the kind that asked for nothing in return except that she keep showing up, keep surviving, keep becoming. But at 32 weeks pregnant, 8 months with only 2 months remaining until her due date, Isolde made a choice that changed everything. She stopped taking the wolfsbane. The decision came during a quiet morning in late July. She stood in her small kitchen looking at the jar of dried herbs and realized she couldn't risk it anymore. The baby was viable now, strong. If labor came early, he could survive. And the wolfsbane, helpful as it had been for masking her scent, was still poison. She'd been lucky so far, but luck ran out. She poured it down the sink and watched the dark liquid disappear. Within hours, her scent began to shift, the human smell fading like morning fog. her true nature reasserting itself. Wild honeysuckle, rain on stone, and underneath it all, something ancient and undeniable. Luna. The wind carried it, north along the coast, through the redwoods, over mountains, across 300 miles of territory, and in the Northern Ridge pack house in the middle of a council meeting about territorial boundaries, Callum's wolf caught the scent and went completely utterly feral. One moment he was seated at the head of the conference table, discussing trade agreements. The next his wolf took over. The shift was involuntary, violent. The conference table overturned, papers flying, council members scattering as Callum's massive wolf form crashed through the window in an explosion of glass and wood. And ran. He covered 300 miles in less than 2 days, barely stopping, not eating, not thinking in words anymore, only in the primal pull of the mate bond that had been screaming in agony for 8 months. She was there. She was alive. She was findable. His wolf ran until the ocean scent filled his nose, until the small coastal town appeared on the horizon, until he followed her scent to a diner called the Copper Kettle. By the time he reached Pine Haven, Callum had shifted back to human form, but only barely. His clothes were in tatters. His body was pushed past exhaustion into something like madness. But he was there. He found the diner just as the lunch rush was ending. Delphine was wiping down the counter when the door opened and a man walked in. She took one look at him, wild-eyed, desperate, trembling, with barely contained wolf energy, and knew exactly who he was. He looked like he'd walked through hell, but underneath the desperation, she saw something that made her pause. Genuine anguish, the kind that couldn't be faked. "We're closed," she said calmly. "I'm looking for someone." His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in days. "A woman, late 20s, dark hair. She would have arrived here about 8 months ago. Lots of women pass through Pine Haven. This one is pregnant, very pregnant, and she's running from me." Delphine set down her dish rag and crossed her arms. "And why is she running from you?" Callum's composure cracked. "Because I'm her husband, and I'm the reason she had to run in the first place." The honesty of it stopped Delphine cold. Most men who came looking for women in hiding made excuses, blamed the woman, played the victim. This man just stood there bleeding guilt from every pore. "What did you do to her?" "I chose politics over truth. I let other people tell me what mattered. I stood silent when I should have fought." His voice broke. "And I lost her because I was too much of a coward to be the man she deserved." Delphine studied him for a long moment. She'd gotten good at reading people over 72 years of life. This man was broken, genuinely, completely. But broken didn't always mean safe. "You planning to hurt her?" "No, God, no. I just need to know she's okay, that the baby's okay. That's all. I'll leave after that if she wants me to." "You'll leave? If that's what she wants, yes, I'll walk away. I'll give her money support, whatever she needs, and then I'll go. I won't force her to come back. I won't even ask." Delphine made a decision. It might have been the wrong one. But in 72 years, she'd learned to trust her gut. She lives above the hardware store 2 doors down. 3rd floor. The blue door. She leaned forward, her voice hardening. "But you listen to me. That girl has been through hell. She's built a life here. A good life. You show up and tear that down, I'll make you regret it. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am. And one more thing. She's stronger than you think. Stronger than you deserve. So whatever you're expecting, throw it out. Because she doesn't need you. She's doing just fine without you." The words landed like blows and Callum absorbed them without flinching. "I know." He left, and Delphine immediately picked up the phone and called Isolde's apartment. "Honey, you need to listen to me. Your husband just walked into my diner." The world contracted to a single point. Isolde stood in the middle of her living room, one hand on her belly, trying to breathe through the sudden tightness in her chest. He was here, in Pine Haven. After 8 months of silence and distance and carefully constructed anonymity, Callum had found her. She could run again, pack a bag, disappear before he reached the apartment. But she was 32 weeks pregnant. Running wasn't an option anymore, and maybe some part of her whispered she was tired of running. The knock came 20 minutes later, soft, hesitant. Isolde opened the door. Callum stood in the hallway, and he looked nothing like the polished alpha king she'd married. He looked wrecked, gaunt. His eyes were more gold than human, and his clothes hung on him in shreds. But it was the way he looked at her that stole her breath. Not possessive, not demanding, just devastated and reverent in equal measure. His eyes dropped to her belly. 8 months pregnant now. The swell impossible to miss, obvious and undeniable. Isolde watched his face as the realization hit him, watched the emotions cascade. Shock, wonder, grief, hope. "I didn't know." His voice was barely a whisper. When you left, I swear I didn't know. Isolde stood frozen in the doorway. Part of her wanted to slam the door, lock him out, protect the fragile peace she'd built. But another part, the part that still felt the mate bond like a fist around her heart, couldn't move. Get inside. I'm not having this conversation in my hallway. He stepped in carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. His eyes swept the small space, the second-hand furniture, the bassinet in the corner, the stack of baby books on the coffee table, evidence of a life built without him. It's nice, he said quietly. You've made a home here. I didn't have a choice. I know. Silence stretched between them, heavy, loaded with 8 months of absence and pain. How did you find me? Your scent. You stopped masking it. The wolfsbane was too dangerous for the baby. The baby. He said it like the words were sacred. His eyes dropped to her belly again. When 8 weeks, maybe less. His hand moved involuntarily toward her stomach, then stopped. Dropped. He didn't have permission to touch. Might never have permission again. Is it mine? Yes. For a moment, he just stared at her. Then his legs gave out. Not dramatically, just like someone whose body had finally reached its limit. He sank to the floor, his back against the wall, his face in his hands. God, Isolde, I'm so sorry. For all of it. For Celestine. For the council. For choosing wrong when I should have chosen you. For every moment of pain I caused you. Sorry doesn't fix anything. I know. Sorry doesn't give me back the months I spent thinking I was broken. Sorry doesn't erase standing in that great hall while you stayed silent. Sorry doesn't rebuild trust you shattered. I know. He looked up at her and she saw her own pain reflected in his eyes. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed what we had. But I need you to know that I exposed everything. Grimwood's in prison. Celestine's exiled. The whole pack knows the truth. They know you were right. They know I was wrong. I don't care about the pack. Then what do you care about this baby, my safety? Building a life where I'm not measured by what I can or can't provide. Where I'm not a political pawn or a disappointment or a failure. Callum stood slowly, and she saw the effort it cost him. The mate bond withdrawal was clearly killing him. His wolf was barely leashed. But he kept his distance, respected her space. You were never a failure. You were the strongest person in that pack house, and I was too blind to see it. Too concerned with legacy and politics and maintaining control. His voice roughened. Margot saw it. She told me before she died. She said you were twice the Luna I deserved and 10 times the person I was. Isolde's hand moved to the locket at her throat. She waited just long enough. She held on until she knew the baby would be safe. She loved you, more than she loved me, I think, and she was right to. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a storm moving in off the ocean. The light through the windows turned gray and heavy. You should go, Callum, before it gets worse out there. I can't, not yet, not without knowing you'll be okay. I've been okay for 8 months without you. I know, and I'm so damn proud of you for that, for surviving, for building this. He gestured around the apartment, for being strong enough to leave when staying would have destroyed you. The first drops of rain hit the windows, sharp, insistent. But, Isolde prompted, because there was always a but. But I'm asking, not as your alpha, not as the father of your baby, just as the man who loves you and has loved you since the moment the mate bond snapped into place. His voice cracked. I'm asking if there's any chance, any possibility that you might forgive me. Not now. Maybe not for years, but someday. Isolde wanted to say no, wanted to close that door completely and lock it. But as she stood there looking at this broken man who'd traveled 300 miles on wolf paws in desperation, she realized something unexpected. She didn't want him gone. She wanted him to hurt, to understand, to feel every ounce of pain he'd caused, but she didn't want him gone. I don't know if I can forgive you. That's not a no. It's not a yes either. The storm intensified, rain lashing the windows now, wind howling around the corners of the building like something alive and hungry. And then Isolde felt it, a tightening across her abdomen. Not painful, not yet, but unmistakable. Different from the Braxton Hicks contractions she'd been having for weeks. Her hand flew to her belly. Callum saw. What's wrong? Nothing, just practice contractions probably. But even as she said it, another one rippled through her. Stronger this time, more insistent, and this time it hurt. That's not practice. Callum was at her side in an instant. How far apart? This is only the second one. When was the first? Maybe 10 minutes ago. But even as they spoke, another contraction hit. This one brought her to her knees, gasping. 5 minutes. Callum's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Isolde, we need to get you to a hospital now. As if in answer, lightning split the sky. Thunder followed immediately, shaking the windows. The storm was directly overhead now. Isolde moved to the window. The rain was coming down in sheets, visibility maybe 10 feet. The roads would be flooded within the hour, and the nearest hospital was 45 minutes away on a good day. We can't. Her voice was steady despite the fear. Look outside. We won't make it. Then I'm calling an ambulance. She grabbed his arm. There's no time, and they won't be able to get here any faster than we could get out. The roads flood in minutes when storms hit like this. The realization settled over both of them at the same moment. She was going to give birth here, in this small apartment, in the middle of a storm, with only Callum to help. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony after all. Delphine arrived 20 minutes later, having battled through the worsening storm with supplies from the diner's first aid kit and an armload of clean towels. Thought you might need help, she said, taking in the scene. Isolde on the bed, breathing through a contraction. Callum hovering uselessly, looking like he might pass out from sheer panic. Thank God, Isolde breathed when the contraction passed. Delphine took charge immediately. Boiled water, laid out towels. Talked Isolde through each contraction with the calm authority of someone who'd done this before. I had 3 kids, honey. 2 of them at home because the hospital was too far. You're going to be fine. Callum stayed at Isolde's side, held her hand when she let him, wiped her forehead with a cool cloth, murmured encouragement that she couldn't quite hear over the roaring in her ears and the storm raging outside. But every time she faltered, every time she was certain she couldn't do, this couldn't push anymore, couldn't survive another contraction, Callum was there. You can do this. You're the strongest person I know. Just a little more. I've got you. And somehow, impossibly, his voice anchored her. The mate bond damaged and frayed as it was still connected them. And through it, she could feel his strength pouring into her. The labor lasted through the night. 8 hours of pain and pressure, and moments where Isolde was certain her body would simply give up. But it didn't. Dawn broke just as the final push came. Light flooding through the windows as the storm passed. The rain stopping as suddenly as it had started. And then a cry, sharp and furious and alive. Delphine caught the baby, wrapped him in clean towels, and placed him on Isolde's chest. A boy. Perfect. Tiny fists waving indignantly at being expelled from his warm, dark home into this bright, cold world. Isolde's hands came up, automatically cradling him, and the love that flooded through her was so intense it hurt. Physical, visceral, all-consuming. Hello, she whispered. Hello, little one. Callum stood frozen at the bedside, tears streaming down his face unchecked. His hand hovered over the baby, trembling, not daring to touch without permission. Can I? Isolde nodded. His finger touched the baby's hand. Tiny fingers wrapped around it, instinctively gripping with surprising strength, and Callum made a sound like something breaking and healing at the same time. He's perfect. Isolde, he's perfect. Rowan, she said softly, looking down at her son. His name is Rowan Margot Hartwell. Callum's eyes widened. Margot, she gave me this. Isolde touched the locket at her throat with her free hand. Told me that family is built on choice, not blood. That I needed to teach him that. So I'm naming him after the woman who taught me what it means to be strong. She would have loved him. Callum's voice was thick with grief and joy tangled together. She would have been so proud of you. Delphine quietly cleaned up, giving them space. When she finished, she touched Isolde's shoulder gently. I'm going to head home. Give you 3 some time. Call if you need anything. Thank you, Delphine. For everything. For all of it. Delphine smiled, her eyes bright. That's what grandmothers do, honey. She left, and suddenly it was just the 3 of them. New parents and their newborn son. The reality of it settling over them like fresh snow. Callum sat carefully on the edge of the bed, his eyes never leaving Rowan's face. I miss this. The pregnancy. Feeling him kick. All the small moments. Preparing. Anticipating. His voice was raw. I can never get that back. No, you can't. But I'm here now, if you'll let me be. Isolde looked at him. Really looked. At the exhaustion and grief and desperate hope warring in his expression. I don't forgive you yet, Callum. I need you to understand that. This doesn't fix what you did. It doesn't erase the pain or rebuild the trust you shattered. I know. But I'm not sending you away either. She adjusted Rowan against her chest, marveling at his tiny, perfect features. Because Rowan deserves a father, and because some small, stubborn part of me still remembers what we were before everything fell apart. What does that mean? What are you saying? It means we have a lot of work to do. It means you don't get to waltz back into my life and expect everything to go back to normal. It means if you want to be part of this family, you earn it. Every single day. I will. However long it takes. Whatever you need. I need honesty, complete transparency. No more political maneuvering. No more putting the pack above our family. Done. I need equal partnership, not you making decisions and expecting me to fall in line. We decide together. About everything. Agreed. And I need you to understand that I won't be returning to the pack as your subordinate. If I come back, and that's a massive if I come back as an equal. As Luna in truth, not just title. Callum was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'll give you co-alpha status. True shared power. The council's already been reformed. Half female elders now. We abolished the trial of lineage and every other archaic law that measured a Luna's worth by her ability to produce heirs. Isolde looked at him sharply. You did that. Astrid led the charge. But yes, the pack voted unanimously. We're rebuilding. Better. More fair. The way it should have been from the beginning. Ed and Margot, what did you do to honor her? We established the Margot Hartwell Foundation. It funds fertility treatments, adoption services, and provides support for any pack member struggling to have children. His voice softened. No one else will go through what you went through. I swear it on Rowan's life. The baby stirred against Isolde's chest, making small sounds. She adjusted him gently, this tiny perfect person who held her entire heart in his miniature hands. I need time, Callum. I'm not ready to come back yet. Not immediately. Maybe not for months. How much time do you need? I don't know. I need to heal, to figure out who I am outside of being your mate and the pack's Luna, to be just Rowan's mother for a while. I understand, and I'll wait. I'll visit if you'll let me. Help with Rowan. Support you however you need. But I won't push. I won't demand. This is on your timeline now. Isolde studied his face, looking for the lie, the manipulation, the hidden agenda. She found only sincerity, only exhaustion and hope, and the desperate determination of a man who'd lost everything and was terrified of losing it twice. Okay. We'll try. Slowly. Carefully. With the understanding that this might not work, that the damage might be too deep to fully repair. But there's a chance. Yes, there's a chance. Rowan chose that moment to open his eyes for the first time, dark blue like all newborns. But Isolde saw Callum in the shape of his face, saw Margot in the determined set of his tiny jaw, saw possibility. 10 months later, Isolde stood in the memorial garden at Northern Ridge Pack House, Rowan balanced on her hip. The garden was Margot's final gift to the pack. White roses everywhere, blooming in profusion. A marble bench with her name carved into the back. A place for quiet reflection and remembrance. Isolde visited every Sunday. Had been since she'd returned home 4 months ago. The return hadn't been triumphant. No grand ceremony. Just a quiet October afternoon when she loaded her things into Callum's truck, Rowan strapped carefully in his car seat and driven north. Delphine had cried, promised to visit monthly, made Isolde swear she'd call if things got hard. You're always welcome back here, honey. This is your home too now. And it was true. Pine Haven would always be the place Isolde had rebuilt herself. The place she'd learned she could survive alone. The place where Rowan had been born. But Northern Ridge was where she'd learned she could be strong together. The pack had welcomed her back with genuine joy. The Omegas who'd once pitied her now brought meals and baby gifts and cooed over Rowan. The council, reformed and revitalized, had formally apologized for their failure to protect her. And Callum kept every promise. Co-alpha status wasn't just a title, it was real. They made decisions together, signed documents together, held court together. When they disagreed, they worked it out in private and presented a united front. The relationship was still healing. They slept in the same room now, but intimacy was slow, careful, built on trust that had to be earned back piece by fragile piece. But it was happening. Rowan gurgled happily, reaching for the roses. Isolde caught his hand gently. Those have thorns, little love. Just like your Nana Margot. Beautiful but fierce. Footsteps on the stone path. Callum appeared carrying a bouquet of fresh white roses. Thought she might like new flowers. Together they arranged the roses in the vase at the base of the memorial. Rowan babbled between them, unaware of the significance of this place and the woman who'd made their family possible. He looks more like you every day, Callum said softly. He has your stubbornness. That's all you. They sat on the bench, Rowan between them, watching the afternoon light paint the garden gold. The baby grabbed for Callum's finger, holding it with the fierce grip of the very young. Delphine called this morning, Isolde said. She's coming to visit next week, wants to meet the Reformed Council and see how you've shaped up. Callum laughed. I'm terrified of that woman. Good, you should be. She doesn't suffer fools. Neither do you. Isolde looked at him, at the man who'd broken her heart and then spent every day since trying to piece it back together. Who changed diapers at 3 a.m. without complaint? Who supported every decision she made? Who loved their son with a fierceness that sometimes took her breath away? I've been thinking, Callum said carefully, about expanding the foundation, maybe creating satellite centers in other packs, sharing what we've learned about reform and equality. That's ambitious. Is it something you'd want to lead? As your project, Isolde considered. 6 months ago, she would have said no, would have seen it as a trap. But now she saw it for what it was, an opportunity, a chance to ensure no other woman went through what she had, a way to honor Margot's legacy. Yes, but I want Astrid involved, and Delphine if she's willing to consult. Done. Whatever you need. Rowan yawned, his eyes drooping. Isolde shifted him to her shoulder, rubbing his back in slow circles. Do you think she knows, Isolde whispered, looking at Margot's memorial, that we're trying, that we're building something new? I think she knows. She told me to become worthy of you. Callum's voice was soft. I think she'd be pleased we're getting there. We're not there yet. No, not yet, but closer every day. Isolde leaned against him just slightly, felt him carefully wrap his arm around her shoulders, still treating her like something precious that might shatter. The mate bond hummed between them, still scarred, still healing, but warm again, growing stronger with each choice to stay to try to build. They stayed until evening fell soft around them, until Rowan stirred hungry. Walking back to the pack house, Callum carrying the diaper bag while Isolde held their son. Isolde felt gratitude wash over her, not for the pain, but for what the pain had forged. She'd left this place broken, returned whole, not because the breaking had healed, but because she'd built something new from the pieces. In their quarters, Isolde settled into the rocking chair to feed Rowan. Callum sat on the floor beside her, his hand resting gently on her ankle. Connection without demand, presence without pressure. And Isolde realized something that felt like truth. She was happy, not perfectly, not completely. There were still moments when the memories cut sharp, still nights when she woke from dreams of the great hall and Celestine's smile, but happy. She looked down at Rowan, nursing contentedly, one tiny hand wrapped around her finger. Looked at Callum, watching them both with wonder and gratitude written clear on his face. And she whispered the promise she'd been writing in her heart since the night he was born. You will grow up knowing your worth has nothing to do with bloodlines or titles or what others expect of you. You will know that family is built on love and choice. You will know that strength comes in many forms. And you will know that your mother once lost everything and found herself in the losing. Rowan's eyes drifted closed, milk-drunk and peaceful. Callum looked up at her, his eyes bright. He's lucky to have you. We both are, Isolde said gently. And in that moment, in the quiet of their quarters with their son between them, she believed it. This was not the ending she'd imagined all those months ago when she'd run through the rain. It was better, because it was real, earned, built brick by careful brick on a foundation of truth. And tomorrow they would choose it again.